Is there a genre that you'd like to dip into and experiment with that you haven't?
At some point, I have to make like an incredibly funky record.
Yeah. Come on. Got it.
I'm really hoping that in the future, I may get to do some work with the True Loves. I have looked up to that group for a number of years. So I'm really hoping that there is some room in both of our calendars.
Stephanie Ann Johnson and the True Loves.
Hey, you know, from your lips to God's ears, and maybe we'll get something good out of it. I have had some musicians that I respect that have compared me to people like Sharon Jones. So in that spirit, I would love to dip into that. I wouldn't be opposed to writing lyrics for that kind of a thing.
Very cool.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
All right, 2 more questions. Number 1, your favorite Seattle or Northwest artist, and both classic and today. Who are the folks that you really admire from back in the day? Were you a big fan of?
Okay, so like people may have their feelings about this, but like when I was, first picking up a guitar and playing, for a number of years, I just wanted to be Courtney Love. Like, I love Courtney Love. It's so good. Like, Hole was such a big band for me. And this whole notion of female rage and all of this, like, I love it. I'm with it. I love it so much. It's so good. So good. And then today, the hard part about picking a favorite Pacific Northwest artist is that
you're friends
these
with
are
them
my
all.
friends,
yeah, right?
and I
it's
love
like your
them.
Children.
Yeah,
One.
So I'm gonna mention Whitney Mange because of the way that I feel she inspires me to make art, and her story of being a busker at Pike Place. And then a few short years later, doing a record with Seattle Symphony.
Yeah.
So Whitney Mange, I feel feelings about that. If you haven't heard of Sarah Clark, you are remiss.
Okay.
Sarah Clark used to play with a band called Dirty Revival and is now with a group called Con Brio.
Okay.
Get into Sarah Clark's catalog.
Yeah.
Anything that this woman is singing on is your business.
Okay. Okay.
Please.
I will check her out, Sarah Clark.
Yeah. Sarah Clark.
Okay.
I gotta shout out Alan Stone. I have opened for him twice. Alan, I know you know I'm alive up here. The time has come, okay? You can put me on whenever you get ready. It's fine. I'm up here. I live at my mama's house. You can just call. You can come for dinner. It'll be fine. We'll put it together, okay? Alan. Big shout out to Alan Stone. I think the group of musicians that he surrounds himself with are really go-getters.
Oh, also top notch.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to that Swadkins who plays keyboards for him and also sometimes hangs out with those guys in Scary Pockets. And then Tyrone Hendricks. His project is also PDX Soul. If you're into the soul music, get into it.
Okay.
He's got his finger on the pulse.
Awesome.
I think that is just about everybody I want to shout out for right now.
You're playing Pride in the Park.
I am.
This Saturday.
Yes. So Saturday is going to be packed for me because I play Pride in the early afternoon, and then I go over to Seattle Pacific. Their School of Theology is closing after 50 years, and they're having a closing a church service for it. I've been invited to come and play some music for that. So
that's an interesting juxtaposition, those two shows.
And the reason for me, when my faith became something that I was ready to handle and take apart and deal with. This was at the same time that it became clear to me that I am not a cisgendered individual, that, there's more going on in here than I understand. And I'm willing to admit that. And I'm also willing to admit that gender as it sits in this country doesn't make a lot of sense to me, in that you have these genitals, so you will have these roles at work and at home, and you have these genitals, so you will have these roles at work and at home. I think anybody that's been alive for more than 10 minutes is willing to look around and say, life is much more complicated than that.
Right.
Much more, beautifully more complicated than that. I have had the women in my life have shown up and saved my life in incredible and numerous ways. I have been saved by women. And it's not like the men in my life, are slouches either. It's just that when I have needed someone to ride up on a horse and gather me up and carry me away from danger, it's been some gal. It's usually been, some gal with an apron willing to be like, have you eaten?
Right.
Yeah, sit down. When was the last time you had some water? It's been a lot of those discussions.
How do you grew up religious?
My bio dad was very religious.
Okay.
So we were over there at Life Center Church, which is a large non-denominational Christian TV type church. My mom and my grandmother, this was much more of a bohemian thing. We went to Christmas and Easter services, and then the rest of the time on Sundays, we would, maybe we'd have fancy dinner on the china, and maybe somebody would read some Langston Hughes or, Gwendolyn Brooks or some other black poet. We'd play card games. Sundays was much more of a family-oriented time than a time for religious study.
Okay.
So my discovering faith, I love this story. I was at the Neptune, and I was doing that tribute to the Last Waltz that I do every year, and I was singing Aretha Franklin's version of The Weight, and it had taken me several months to teach myself the song and make sure that I could hit all of the notes and do it well. And I was very, very nervous, and I'm probably sure I didn't eat anything, most likely had some whiskey beforehand.
Yeah.
But I blacked out at some point and let my body do what it knew how to do. And when I woke up, I guess, there was a lot of applause, and I could see the atoms splitting in the air, and was just having this incredible moment of, oh my God. And the write-up that I got about it mentioned the atoms splitting in the air.
Wow.
So I didn't know that this was a shared experience that we were all having.
Yeah.
I thought it was me.
Wow.
So in that same year where, my gender kind of really finally shook loose out of a binary way of thinking, was the same year that my faith came to me, and, God spoke to me in that moment and said, well, look at this. You've already built me a nice little house. I might as well just sit here.
Wow. Mm-hmm. How have you been able to, I'm trying to think of the right wording. How does your sexuality play into your faith? Because sometimes those things are at odds.
Dolly Parton tells us. It's in her book, and it's also in, she does Dolly Parton's America, which is it's a 6-part NPR Radio Lab, something like this,
okay.
Show. And she talks about being in an abandoned church as a child and finding that sweet spot, that beautiful intersection between the sexuality, the sensuality, and the making of the music. And And that is where I find myself. That is where I find myself. Right there in the middle. The urge to be sexual with people sometimes happens in the middle of making music. So honestly, making music with others, whether that be the musicians I'm making music with or the audience that I'm, performing for, having this experience with, that's definitely a way I find myself as a sexual being. That's definitely an avenue that my sexuality travels.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh,
That's
yes.
got to make writing songs with people even more interesting.
Some folk
Those writing sessions must be.
Some folk are comfortable talking about it,
Yeah.
and some folk aren't. So, with the folk that aren't, we just don't mention it.
Yeah.
Or maybe, we have a meal instead.
There you go.
Because sharing food with people and taking in sustenance and being fed
Intimate.
is very intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed with your whole. I really am. I mean, I could sit here and blow smoke up your ass, but I think you're one of the more talented people that we have in the Northwest, and I feel honored to be able to interview you, be able to introduce you on stage, to be able to play you on the radio.
I appreciate that.
It's all very inspiring to me, and I think you're going to go far.
Yeah,
Very far.
Alan, let's hope it. Let's hope it a lot. Yeah.
Stephanie Ann Johnson, our Pacific Northwest Artist of the Month for June.